Hello, and welcome back to Early Years Explorers, where we talk about early childhood in a way that actually makes sense in real classrooms, real homes, and real mornings when you've somehow left the house with the lunchbox but forgotten the child's water bottle. I'm your host, Afaf, and today we're talking about a big one, starting school. Now, if you're currently preparing your child for big school, you may have already discovered that this apparently simple milestone can trigger approximately 47 different parenting questions. Do they know enough? Can they open their lunchbox? What if they cry? What if they don't make friends? What if they need help in the bathroom? What if they don't eat? And perhaps the question nobody says out loud, what if I'm the one who cries? Because somewhere between buying the tiny backpack and writing their name on 17 different items of clothing, it suddenly hits you. Your child is going to school. And honestly, they are still tiny. So today, we're going to talk about what preparing for big school actually looks like. We're going to look at what research tells us about school readiness, what it looks like in real classrooms, what children actually need before they start, and maybe just as importantly, what they don't need. Because somewhere along the way, school readiness became this mysterious checklist. Apparently, your 3-year-old needs to know the alphabet, write their name, count to 100, and possibly have a 5-year strategic plan. Seriously, this is not what starting school is. So pull up a chair, grab your coffee or tea, and let's get into it. Hi, and thanks for joining me. Now, in this first segment, I'm going to talk about why the first day is not actually the beginning. When we think about starting school, we usually picture one day, the first day, the tiny backpack, the oversized hat, the photo at the classroom door, the child who is smiling beautifully for the camera and then immediately realizes what's happening. Suddenly, there are tears. Sometimes from the child, sometimes from the parent, sometimes both. And honestly, no judgment. But here's the thing. The first day of school is not actually where the transition begins. You see, by the time your child walks through that classroom door, the transition has already been happening for weeks, sometimes even months. And this is where the research around transitions is actually quite reassuring. You see, children generally cope better with new environments when they have a familiar routine, secure relationships, and opportunities to gradually experience independence. Which sounds very academic, I know, but in real life, it might look like this. Letting someone else read them a bedtime story, spending time with their grandparents, going to a new playground, trying an activity without standing directly next to them, practicing saying goodbye, and then discovering you actually do come back again and again. Because that's really what transition is about. It's not about waking up one morning and suddenly becoming school ready. It's about gradually learning new places can be safe, new adults can be trusted, mum or dad can leave, and they usually come back. And those experiences start long before their first big day at school. I think sometimes parents put enormous pressure on themselves to prepare their child honestly. They start buying books, practicing letters, watching videos, creating routines, and suddenly the house starts looking suspiciously like a big preschool preparation boot camp. But honestly, you don't need to recreate a classroom at home. You don't need worksheets, you don't need flashcards, and you definitely don't need to sit your child down every afternoon and ask them to demonstrate their readiness for formal education. Sometimes the best preparation is much simpler. Predictable routines, talking about what's coming, reading books about starting school, visiting the school if possible, and allowing your child to gradually practice doing things for themselves. Because the transition into big school is not one giant leap. It's lots of tiny steps. And those tiny steps, they all add up. Okay, let's talk about one of the biggest myths around starting school, the idea that children need to arrive already knowing things. Every year, parents will say to me, he only knows some letters. She can't write her name yet. Should I be teaching her numbers? And my answer is usually something along the lines of, that's why they're coming to school. You see, big school is not graduation. They haven't missed the boat. They don't need to arrive with a completed skill set and a portfolio. And yet, I completely understand where the pressure comes from. Parents want to do the right thing. Nobody wants their child to be behind. But here's where we need to pause and ask, behind who exactly? Because children develop differently. One child might walk into school knowing every letter of the alphabet, but they need support joining a group. Another might not recognize a single letter, but be able to spend half an hour building an extremely complicated dinosaur house out of blocks. Both children are learning. Both children are developing. And both children belong in school. When we talk about school readiness, research and developmental frameworks consistently point us towards something much broader than academic knowledge. Social and emotional development, language, physical development, self-regulation, curiosity, relationships, the ability to explore and engage. Can your child communicate when they need something? Can they begin to ask for help? Can they cope when something doesn't go exactly as planned? Can they try something again? Not perfectly, not independently every single time. Just begin. Can they do that? And honestly, these are the skills we work on every single day in preschool. Because you can teach a child to memorize the alphabet, but learning how to manage the emotional devastation of somebody else taking the red crayon, that takes time and practice, and occasionally some very serious negotiations. So instead of asking, what should my child know before he starts school? Maybe the better question is, what experiences can I give my child before they actually start school? Opportunities to play, opportunities to talk, opportunities to make choices, opportunities to struggle a little, opportunities to be around other children, opportunities to discover. All of these opportunities, that is preparation. Now let me paint a picture for you. It's 7:15 in the morning, we've barely started the day, and I have one child who is happily playing, another is painting something that may or may not look like a flower, someone is asking me if it's snack time yet, and then a child suddenly comes running over, completely devastated. Not mildly upset, not disappointed, devastated. Why? Because someone sat in their chair. Now, to be clear, there were several empty chairs around the classroom, but apparently this particular chair was their chair. And this is one of the things that I love most about preschool. Children remind us constantly that their world is completely different from ours. To us, it's just a chair. To them, it is a violation of a long-standing agreement that apparently existed entirely in their imagination. And this is where preschool becomes about so much more than academics, because these are the moments where children are learning. Someone else might want what I want. Things don't always go according to my plan. I can feel upset about that, and eventually I can figure out what to do next. Now, could I solve the chair crisis immediately? Of course I could. I could point to another chair, move everyone around, restore peace, and continue with my morning. And honestly, some days when it's 7:15 and I've already answered 17 questions about dinosaurs, I am very tempted, believe me. But sometimes we pause and we coach. You wanted to sit there. Your friend is sitting there now. What could you do? And at first, there's nothing. They just stare at you like you've betrayed them, like you've asked them to solve an international conflict. But eventually, they might choose another chair or ask if they can sit there later or discover another solution entirely. And these tiny moments, they all matter because preschool is full of them. Someone takes the toy that they wanted. Their tower falls down. You spill your water. Your best friend suddenly decides they don't want to play with the same game anymore. And no, these things are not emergencies, even though sometimes the emotional response would suggest otherwise. They are opportunities. Opportunities to practice, to communicate, to problem solve, to recover. And this is where children start building confidence. Not because adults make every problem disappear, but because children begin to realize something went wrong and I figured out what to do next. Now, I know some of you are listening and thinking, okay, that's great, Afaf. But what do I actually do? Fair question. So let's talk about 5 things that genuinely help before your child starts school. And the good news is, none of them involve turning your living room into a preschool kindergarten. Let them practice independence. Let them open their lunchbox, put on their shoes, carry their bag. Try pulling up their pants, put their hat on. And yes, they may put their shoes on the wrong feet. They may put the hat on backwards. They may somehow manage to get one arm through the neck of their shirt. This is all part of the process. And I know it's tempting to jump in, especially when you're already late. But independence develops through practice, not through watching us do everything quickly. Sometimes the most useful thing we can say is, have a try. Why don't you try doing it? And then wait. Which honestly is harder than it sounds. The other one, read together. And I don't mean turning every book into an assessment. You don't need to stop at every page and ask, what color was that? What letter is that? How many animals are there? Sometimes just read the book. Enjoy it. Talk about it. Let your child interrupt the story halfway through because they've suddenly remembered something that happened to them last summer. That's fine. Reading together builds language, connection, imagination, and conversation. And perhaps most importantly, it helps children associate books with comfort and enjoyment, which is a pretty good place to start. The third one, build simple routines. Children don't need a military schedule, but they do need a predictable routine because that can make the world feel easier to understand. Breakfast, get dressed, brush your teeth, shoes, goodbye. Children begin to learn what comes next. And when they start school, that sense of predictability can help enormously. Because even if school itself is new, the idea of following a routine isn't completely unfamiliar. They're already used to it. The fourth one, give them opportunities to be around other people. Go on play dates, visit the cousins, the playground, family gatherings, community activities. These are all opportunities for children to practice being around others. And no, your child does not need to walk confidently into every group and immediately announce, hello everyone, I'm ready to socialize. Some children take longer. Some observe first. Some find one person and stay with them, which is fine. Some spend the first 20 minutes standing behind their parents' leg, and that's okay. Social confidence develops differently. The goal isn't to force children to become outgoing. It's to give them opportunities to gradually build confidence around others. And the fifth one, talk about school. And here's the important part. Talk about it positively, but honestly. You'll have toys and activities to explore with. I'll say goodbye and then I'll come back and get you. And you can also say, you might feel excited, you might feel nervous, you might miss me, and that's okay, because the goal isn't convincing children that they will only feel happy. It's helping them understand that they can have different feelings, but they will still be okay. Okay, in this next part, I want to clear a few things up. These are myth busters, things you can stop worrying about, hopefully. Myth number 1, my child needs to know the alphabet before they start school. No, they don't. Knowing letters is lovely. If they do, good for them, fantastic. Being interested in letters is wonderful, but your child does not need to arrive having mastered the alphabet. Again, that's part of the learning. Myth number 2. My child needs to write their name. Also no. If your child can write their name, great, fantastic. If they currently write something that looks like a medical prescription, also fine, good for them. They are developing. Myth number 3. My child can't cry at drop-off. Absolutely not. In fact, crying at drop-off is incredibly common. And here's something parents often need to hear. A child crying when you leave does not automatically mean they aren't ready. It doesn't mean you've made the wrong decision. It doesn't mean they're unhappy all day. Sometimes it simply means, I don't want you to leave because you're my safe person. And that makes complete sense. The goal isn't necessarily to stop the tears. The goal is to build trust through consistency. You say your goodbye, you leave, and then you come back again and again. Your child learns that. They leave, but they return. That trust grows over time, not on the first day. And finally, my child needs to be completely independent before preschool. No, they don't. Preschool is literally where children practice independence. Teachers are there to support. We guide, we encourage. We help when help is needed. So please don't feel like you have to send your child in fully prepared to manage life independently. If they could already do everything for themselves, we'd probably be asking them to teach the class. Now, this is the parent part nobody talks about enough. This part is for you, the parents, because starting preschool is not just a transition for children, it's a transition for parents too. And I think sometimes parents feel like they're supposed to be completely fine about it. You're meant to smile, say goodbye, walk confidently to the car and continue with your day. But sometimes you get to the car and think, what have I done? You wonder if they're still crying. You consider walking back. You check your phone, then check it again. Then somehow convince yourself that the school hasn't called because your phone isn't working. We've all been there. And here's what I want you to remember. Children often borrow our confidence. That doesn't mean you have to pretend you're not emotional. It just means that when it's time to say goodbye, try to communicate. This is safe. I trust these people. I know you can do this. And sometimes the best goodbye is actually a short one. A quick hug, a small kiss, I love you, and I'll see you after school. And then you go. And then you really go. Because the longer you hover in the doorway, the harder it can sometimes become. And yes, you are absolutely allowed to get into your car and cry afterwards. I'm not judging anyone. Starting big school is a big moment. You've spent years being their main person. You know how they like their food cup. You know what happens when they're tired. You know which cup they insist on using. And suddenly you're trusting someone else to get to know them. That can feel enormous. But this is where the relationship between families and teachers matters so much. Because when you trust us, your child will trust us. Tell us what helps your child. Tell us if they're nervous. Tell us if something has changed at home. Tell us about the little things. Because when families and teachers work together, children feel that connection. And gradually, the classroom becomes another safe place, not a replacement for home. Just another place where your child is known and cared for. So here's your Early Years Explorers challenge for this week. Choose one thing your child usually asks you to do for them, just one. Maybe it's putting on their shoes, opening their lunchbox, packing away their toys, pouring their water, carrying their bag, and instead of immediately doing it, pause. You can offer support, you can guide, but give them a chance to try. And here's the important part. Don't focus only on whether they succeed. Notice the effort. You kept trying. You figured that out all by yourself. That was tricky, but you didn't give up. Because confidence doesn't grow from hearing, "You're amazing at everything." It grows from experiencing. That was hard, but I can try. And honestly, that's a pretty good lesson to take into preschool and into life. So here's a quote of the week, and it's from Fred Donaldson. Children learn as they play. Most importantly, in play, children learn how to learn. And I love this because sometimes in our rush to prepare children for school, we forget that play is already doing so much of the work. When children play, they're communicating, negotiating, imagining, problem solving, experimenting, taking risks, making mistakes, trying again. So if your child spends the afternoon turning your couch into a pirate ship, your laundry basket into a boat, and your kitchen utensils into musical instruments, congratulations. You have a very active learner. Possibly a very messy one, but still, they're learning. Here's a final thought. If we zoom out, the message around school readiness is actually quite simple. Children do not need to be perfect before they begin. They don't need to know everything. They don't need to be completely independent, and they don't need to walk into the classroom without tears. All they need is time, opportunities, and supportive relationships. And they need adults who believe that they are capable, even when they're still figuring things out. Because starting big school is not the finish line. It's the beginning. And beginnings can be exciting and messy and emotional, and sometimes involve a backpack that is almost bigger than the child themselves who's carrying it. But that's okay, because every child walks into that classroom with their own experiences, personality, strength, and worries. And our job isn't to make sure they're perfectly prepared for every possible moment. It's to help them feel safe enough to begin. Remember, one goodbye, one new friend, one dropped lunchbox, one slightly wrong-footed shoe at a time. Thanks for listening to Early Years Explorers. Whether you're a parent currently labeling every sock wondering if your child is ready, or a teacher preparing to welcome a brand new group of tiny humans with very big personalities, this transition matters. The routines, the goodbyes, the conversations, the reassurance, the moments when you step in and the moments when you step back just enough. All of it is helping children take the next step with a little more confidence. So until next time, keep exploring, keep trusting the process, and remember, you don't have to have everything figured out before you begin. Sometimes the biggest adventures start with a tiny backpack, 2 little shoes, and a parent standing at the classroom door trying very hard not to cry. I'm Afaf, and this has been Early Years Explorers. See you next time.